Hi, I'm Michael Santos, and I want to welcome you back to the Earning Freedom Mastermind program, the Straight A Guide version. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's two prerequisites to this program. The first one is values, then we get into goals, and both of those are necessary, values and goals, before we can advance on to the Straight A Guide. And so today, in today's version, I am going to talk about goals. I'm going to talk about how goals helped me through the journey. And I'm going to talk about how I'm still using those goals today and how they're contributing to the life that I've been building since I released from the prison system a few years ago. I want you to emphasize and start by saying at the beginning of this episode, as I do at the beginning of or throughout every episode and through every lesson, my advice to anybody who's incarcerated, whether you are in a segregated housing unit where I started my term, or you're inside of a jail, or you are inside of a prison and you're watching this video, please understand and embrace the reality is that the decisions that you're making while you're inside there have a direct influence on your prospects for success when you get out. And your decisions really should be centered on the values by which you profess to live and the goals that you set that determine whether or not you are absolutely committed to those values that you define yourself by. And as I mentioned I would do, I'd be sharing this message through my own story and through what worked for me. I mentioned in the previous lesson on values that I had set 3 values to define who I was going to be. I wanted other people to know that I am on a path, and that path was going to be to succeed upon release. I wanted to make sure that when I got out of prison, I came back to society strong, with my dignity intact, with opportunities that I could go to build my life. And if I want to, whatever I want to do, I did not want my prison experience to be an anchor that limits me from being able to move forward. And that's really what I want for every individual who's watching any program or anything that I create. I want individuals to know this is really not about who I am, but rather about how the lessons that Masterminds taught me really advanced possibilities for success, because I believe they can advance possibilities for you. And I really want you to have, or anybody who's using any program that I create, to have a different outcome than what most people experience who spend significant amounts of time inside of the prison system. So in this lesson on goals, it's really going to begin by me asking you a question, and that is really, what have you been doing? What specific steps have you been taking? Can you talk about that are leading you to a predefined an outcome that you are defining? Now, I'm not talking about simply waiting for calendar pages to turn, because you don't have anything to do with that, right? You can simply wait for calendar pages to turn if you choose, but at the end of the day, those calendar pages are turning regardless of what you do. You can choose to sleep all day, you can choose to play cards, you can choose to be angry and upset and blame the world for what's going on, or you can say, look, I got to live in this world as it exists. There's nothing I can do to change the past, but I do have the power within to make changes in my future. And that knowledge, once you accept that, that's the beginning of making all the difference in the world. At the end of this particular lesson on goals, I'm going to ask each of you to consider a question. And that question is, what specific goals can you achieve over the next month, 12 months, and 60 months that will have a massive difference in your life? So remember that. At the end of this lesson, I'm going to flash that up on the screen and ask you to have that as a takeaway. Because if you can begin thinking in those concepts of what you can do, that really puts a series of steps in place that advance the ball. It helps you realize every day how and why the decisions that you are making today have an influence on your prospects for success. Now, I didn't think that way before I went to prison. It wasn't until I was in prison that I started to have this shift in focus, have this shift in the way I looked at my life and I looked at my relationship to the world. But once I made that shift, everything began to change. And I credit it, as I frequently say, I credit all of that to the masterminds that inspired me. First, it was Socrates, but then there were many more. If you read any of my work, you will know that I was inspired by Malcolm X. I was inspired by Gandhi. I was inspired by Viktor Frankl. I was inspired by so many masterminds who really caused me to see the world differently and caused me to ask questions of myself of what can I do? What can I do during this time that I have to serve? Because that was a reality. I could not make an influence on whether a judge was going to release me or whether Congress was going to pass some type of parole bill that might influence me. All I could do was sow seeds so that when an opportunity opened, I would be able to be in the best possible position. And that's what I want you to be thinking about when you contemplate goals. I want you to figure out what can you do to make sure that you walk out of here strong, so that you walk out of here with huge opportunities to build a better life, to either perhaps live a better life. And when you're thinking about this, you've got to think in these terms of, well, who are the people that are going to be influential in your life? As I mentioned, in my case, I eventually coined or came up with this term of an avatar. An avatar was the person that I wanted to connect with, that I wanted to see. I wanted that avatar to see me as something more than the bad decisions that I made when I was 20 years old. And I made a lot of bad decisions when I was 20. I started making those bad decisions, much earlier, but when I was 20, those decisions turned criminal. I started trafficking in drugs, and when I was 23, I get busted, and bam, I'm in a bad situation. But when I was in the shoe, in that Pierce County jail, and I identified this concept of don't live and complain and whine about what I've done, because I'm in here because of my own volition. Now, I'm not implying that some of you are inside of prison because of other circumstances. That I don't make any judgment on that. That's not relevant to me. What is relevant is that you are there. And what is relevant is that I do everything within my power out here to try and persuade legislators and the system on how to reform this system, but I can't do it by myself. I need guys inside who are changing their lives, and I can document that and show you, see, these are people that would be far better off in society. So I'm asking you to join me in this quest of trying to change the system. I'm asking you to join this quest that one of my masterminds told me to do, to be the change you want to see in the world. I want to see change in the world. I want to sow seeds that will make that happen. And part of the seeds that I have to sow is conveying the lessons that I learned from masterminds to others. And one of those lessons is to live a values-based, goal-oriented life. So think about the people that you want to influence. I'm doing it right now. I know that I want to influence employers. I want employers to open job opportunities for my brothers and sisters who come through the prison system. So I know what I have to do. If I'm going to convince those employers to do that, I've got to be able to show that I'm doing my part. I am showing the lessons that I learned to people in prison or formerly incarcerated people. And you see me doing it. That's what I'm doing right now. As I've mentioned numerous times, I don't have a big budget, right? I'm just one guy who just got out of prison. I got a gazillion other things, not a gazillion, but I got a lot of different responsibilities out here. I've got properties to manage. I've got businesses that I'm building. I've got clients that pay me a fee every month to do work for them. But I continue all the time sowing these seeds, creating content, creating lessons and courses that I try to distribute in prisons, because if I do that, then I can have more credibility when I go and speak with employers, or I have more credibility when I go and speak in front of a university and talk about the prison system and talk about why we need to change the system, or when I go into Washington, D.C. and I'm interacting with legislators or legislative aides. I want to be able to show them that I am trying to get more people or help more people come out successfully. And if I do that, then I advance that ball of making reforms more possible, because people see me as being authentic. I want you to join me in that. And that's why I spend so much time. Hey, lead a values-based life. Be transparent. Make sure that the world knows what you are doing and why. Because if you do that, that's how you start contributing to this cycle. So my avatars when I came in were the same way. Right now I'm thinking about investors who are going to invest money in projects that I create. I think about bankers who have to, provide me lines of credit or something to do what I'm trying to do. Or I have to think about health inspectors because I'm launching a healthcare company and I've got to overcome my criminal background and kinds of problems like that. I got all these people. They're all my avatars. Those are all people. So I'm thinking about them. What can I do today to influence a better outcome tomorrow? But when I was in prison, I was thinking about what? I was thinking about my case manager, my unit manager, the warden. I was thinking about these staff members have a direct influence on my life. What can I do that will persuade them to open higher levels of liberty for me, to reduce my security levels so that I could get from the SHU unit into a general population, from the general population in a penitentiary to the general population in an FCI, and then from a medium to a low, and then from a low to a camp, and then to a halfway house. See, all those people that made those decisions, to me, they were my avatars, just as were people that I didn't know and I would never see, like university admissions officers that may admit me into class, or publishers that may extend a publishing contract, or women who I wanted to bring into my life. And all of these people, I didn't know who they were. And all that I would have to influence them was this record that I built. And that's what you've got. You've got to be thinking about what kind of record can you build to influence your avatars. Who are they? What do they do? What can you do today to influence them tomorrow? If you ask those kinds of questions, that can and should guide your behavior. That can and should give you the reason to choose your friends in prison very carefully. That should help you make decisions to say no when somebody is about to influence you into a train wreck that can cause you a lot of problems, or ask you to raise your hand that will get you into some type of a problem that you've got to start spending the next 5 years or 10 years trying to get out of. All of these questions that you can ask right now should help you guide your decisions on what you can do. And that's what goals are all about. Your goals should be very specific. Okay? In the handout of the lesson that you're receiving, I use this acronym that's a lot of corporate organizations use. It's called, when you're setting goals, set SMART goals. Now, I didn't have that acronym when I was in prison, but I'll tell you that I followed the same path. When I was in prison, I didn't know about this acronym of a SMART goal, where every letter means something, okay? It's helping you when you're defining a goal. What it's basically telling you is, if you're going to set a SMART goal, it's got to be specific. That's the first letter, right? The S is, if you're talking about a SMART goal, the S stands for specific. The goal has to be very clearly defined, okay? I'll tell you a little story. I was in prison and I met my wife, who I'll talk a little bit about through this course, I think. I met her back, I was in Fort Dix. It was like 2002. I was in about my 14th or 15th year of prison. And we fall in love, and I start kind of coaching her, just like I'm doing right here, but from a prison visiting room. And I remember, telling her, hey, we're going to build our lives together. We're going to do some things together, follow this path that has got me through the first 15 years in prison, and it's going to change your life. And I remember holding out my hand like this. And I said, 5 years. If you agree to join me on this path, in 5 years, your life is going to be fundamentally different than it is today. And she came up with this concept. She said, I'm sure that we're going to be very successful. And I said, that's equivalent to what you hear me say in the previous videos. That's just a lot of happy talk. Anybody can say they're going to be successful. But, that doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? If you don't define it, if it's not specific, that's not a goal. I don't want to hear we're going to be very successful. What I want to hear is very specific. What are you going to do? I know that I'd set those values previously in my previous episode. I told you there was a focus on education, focus on contributing to society, and focusing on building a support network. Well, that was the first set that guided my journey. But as I evolved, you go through prison, things change. As I got to the end, I remember setting a different goal. I said, I want to make sure that I have enough money in my commissary account that I don't have to earn a penny during my first year of liberty. I don't want to earn a penny. I want to earn money, but I want to make sure I have enough savings in my bank account, in my commissary account, that if I don't get a job, if nothing happens, I'm still solid. I got enough money to buy all my clothes, to buy a car, to get into my housing, to do whatever I need to do. I want to have all that cash set aside. I remember setting that goal, and I far exceeded that before I got out of prison, and that helped me launch my career. But it wouldn't have happened had I not started very early on in my journey. And it's why I feel so passionate and so strongly about sharing this message with each of you. Set a very specific goal. That's number one. That's the first S of a SMART goal. The second is it's got to be measurable, right? It's got to be something that you can measure. Like if my wife says, we're going to be very successful, well, that doesn't mean it because I can't measure that. Successful by whose standards, right? If you look at the literature on criminal justice, you're going to see successful is simply not going back to prison in 5 years after you get out and having some mediocre job. That's not successful. That's not, but if you measure, if that's your definition for success, well, God, great, just, baby steps, right? Mediocrity. But if you want to pursue excellence, if you want to build something that's better, that's stronger, that gives you more power and makes you feel great about waking up every morning, well, then you need to set more specific goals, and they have to be something that you can measure, that within a certain time frame, either you've done it or you didn't. You missed the mark. Okay? And it's okay to miss the mark as long as you are the one that's making that decision so that you can fail fast and get going again on the next version or make a shift. You make a shift, confidence restored, you're back on track. Okay? That's what it's all about. Setting a specific goal, making sure that it's measurable, and then the A in our SMART goal, right? S, specific, M, measurable. A, it's got to be action-oriented, right? You've got to make it happen. It's not just I'm going to get out of the shoe in 30 days. I'm going to get out of the shoe in 180 days. That's not what it's about. It's got to be action-oriented. If it's going to be a SMART goal, you've got to do something to make it happen. When I was in the shoe, I was always setting goals. How many push-ups am I going to do today? How many squats am I going to do? What can I do and measure that will make a meaningful impact or influence on this longer-term perspective of preparing for success? That's what I want you to be thinking about. Make sure that it's specific, your goals. Make sure that it's measurable. Make sure that it's action-oriented. And then R, make sure that it's realistic, right? You can't undo the past, okay? I can't do anything to say, hey, there's going to change, the policy of the prison, and all of a sudden, they're going to bring, it's going to be co-ed, or it's going to be, whatever. That's I've got no control over that, so that's not realistic. Or to say I'm going to get parole. That's not realistic. I had a non-parolable sentence. Or to say that, a judge is going to let me out. I don't control that, right? Realistic. What can you do that is going to move the needle in your life? That's the essence of a SMART goal. Specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic. And finally, the T, it's got to be time-bound. It's got to be time-sensitive. You've got to have a very clear start and clear finish. That's one of the things that I hated about being a prisoner, because I didn't know really how long it was going to end. I had a 45-year old law sentence, But I had all these variables as an old law prisoner. What could happen? Could I see the parole commission? When could I see the parole commission? What about a halfway house? I mean, there was a lot that I didn't know, and it was very frustrating because I didn't know what was going to happen. I know under the new law, you've got this no parole access and less good time. But you just don't know. You don't control that. You've got to, in a goal, you've got to have a time-sensitive thing that you control, right? It's the government that's controlling when you get out of prison or when you get out of the SHU. What can you control to say, maybe I can advance that possibility, or maybe I can influence somebody else to advance that possibility? That would be a smart goal. So when I was in prison in the SHU and I read Socrates, my mastermind, who taught me about setting clear values, I came up with this three-pronged approach. I spoke about it before. I'll speak about it again. One of them, I needed to focus on educating myself. That became a value for me. 2, I needed to focus on contributing to society in some type of meaningful, measurable way. And 3, I needed to build a support network. That's what it was about for me. So now I needed to set clear goals that would reflect my commitment to that. What would it be? Well, it didn't matter what I wanted. What mattered was what my avatars would want. That's how I looked at it. And so when I thought, well, how would my avatars really assess whether I truly was making a commitment to education? Well, they would want me to have a university degree. If I had a university degree, clearly I made a commitment to education, because you can't fake that. That's not simply one of these programs that you put your butt in a chair and you get a certificate and you did it. No, a university degree, you've got to go through benchmarks. You've got to persuade professors that you've passed a test, that you've mastered the material, that you can advance. And so I felt that if I got a university degree, well, that would be very specific. It would be very measurable. It would require my own action. It would be realistic, although I didn't know how I was going to do it in the beginning, and it would be time bound because I put a timeline. I had a 45-year sentence. I knew I could serve the term in 26 years if I didn't lose any good time, but I didn't even know how to process 26 years because I was only 23, right? And I hadn't even been alive 26 years. And you can't really process that, right? And some of you may have sentences that are longer than mine, whatever. At the end of the day, I just used my concept. I said, this is, today, you take today, you advance 26 years. That's like what? 26, 36, 46, 40. That's like 2043 as I'm filming this. And a little hard to think about how am I going to process what my life is going to be like in 2043. That was too hard, right? So I couldn't think of that. So instead, I thought about 10 years. In the first 10 years, I am going to get a college degree. I'm going to find a way. That's specific, it's measurable, it's action-oriented, it's realistic, it's time-bound. And I put 10 years because I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't have any money. I was in jail. I didn't know what was going to happen, but that was one of my goals. Second was going to be, I set a value of contributing to society in some type of meaningful, measurable way. Well, in my case, I came up with this concept of I'm going to publish. If I can publish something, then my avatars would truly believe that I contributed to society. And you can see behind me, you can see behind me, I have these books, right? I got the books right here. I got Inside, Earning Freedom. Those are 2 of, I wrote 20 books when I was in prison, right? But that was part of my plan because I said, if I can publish, well, what's happening? Now, those books are generating revenues. They're being sold in bookstores. Professors are assigning them to university students. People are paying money to read them. And by them doing that, I'm contributing to the economy because taxes are being generated. People are being employed by the effort. Students are learning. It's very clear. It's irrefutable that I'm contributing to society. So that is why publishing became one of my goals. I said within 10 years, I'm going to find a way to publish something. And I published a lot of books, and more than 100,000 of those books are in distribution right now. And tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people have learned from them. So by doing that, that fed into my third goal, which was I got to find 10 people that I don't know and 10 people that don't know me, and I got to persuade them to believe in me. If I can do that, well, then I would have accomplished my 3 values: university degree, publishing books. I didn't know it was going to be books at the time, just publishing something, and finding 10 people to believe me. If I could do those things, I believed that I could will those avatars into my life. And if I willed those avatars into my life, I truly believed that more opportunities would open. That's what I'm trying to share with you. I didn't say I'm going to get out of jail. In fact, I served every day of my sentence. I didn't get out of jail one day early. Okay? But what made all the difference was how I got out of jail. I got out of the SHU and got into general population in a USP. And then I got out of a USP and went to an FCI. And then I went to a FCI low. And then I went to a camp. And then I went to a halfway house. And then I got home confinement. And then I got off of supervised release in a year, even though I had 7 years waiting. And I got off of, what was next? Parole after a year, even though I had 19 years of parole. And just recently, I got off of special parole after a year, even though I had 3 years. So I had 29 years of supervised release that I was supposed to serve. I finished it all in less than 4 years. Why? Because I had a values-based, goal-oriented adjustment in prison. And it's those seeds that I started sowing at the earliest part that made all the difference in the world for me. And I know it's what's going to make all the difference in the world for you. And in our next episode, you're going to hear from my friend Luis Rivera, who had a 140-year sentence and life plus 140. He started a little before me. He started in 85. I started in 1987. But he also is free right now. How did he do it? He'll tell you. He focused. He never lost hope. He understood how to serve time, how to reject the criminal lifestyle, how to make good decisions in prison, how to position himself so that opportunities would open. And because of that, when the opportunity opened, he was in a position that people opened those doors for him. You'll hear him talking about Julie Stewart at FAM. You'll hear him talking about Sam Sheldon, a former assistant United States attorney who went into private practice but had a passion for helping guys in prison. And Sam's a good friend of mine and helped me in many ways. Although I didn't get out of jail, he did get Luis out of jail. Otherwise, he'd still be there. And I know these times are tough when you're hearing all this talk about law and law and order and so on and so forth. It doesn't look good for people in prison. But you've got to have hope. You've got to recognize that you can make decisions today so that when the time comes, you are ready. And that's why I leave you with this question. What specific goals can you achieve in the next month, in the next 12 months, and the next 60 months? Make sure that when you think that through, you're thinking in terms of the values that define who you are as a human being. And if you want, when you get access to the internet, you got my contact information there. Just send me an invite through the email if you can, and give me your answer to that question, and I will publish it on this new website I'm creating called jobsandresourcesforfelons.com, because I want to show it to employers, and I'd love to feature your work. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Tomorrow is my friend Luis Rivera, who had a life plus 140, and now he's free. And I look forward to seeing you out here as well. Thank you.